Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, as always, Flex Shane. You can follow me on Twitter at the Flex Network One. I'm actually flying solo today. What we wanted to do for you is we wanted to break down, really on a team by team basis, what exactly the draft is going to mean for those teams. I'll talk about some of the picks that I liked, some of the ones I thought maybe would be reaches, and really just go through each team in each division. And today we're going to start with the AFC. So don't want to bury the lead. I think that everybody was pretty excited in general about the draft. It was a pretty amazing time. I mean, I got to give it to the NFL. I mean, a lot of people weren't sure if they were going to pull it off, but you know what? They did it. And even though Roger Goodell pretty much looked like a robot and felt like a robot, I think he did a good job. So you know what? As a Patriots fan, I'm not a Goodell fan. That's just natural. But I gotta hand it to him. He did a good job. So all right, let's get started. Buffalo Bills. Look, not really fantasy related, but they landed AJ Epinesa at the 222 pick. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with that pick. Like Epinesa was pretty high ranked. He's a defensive end, and overall, he was one of the, I think, a top 3 ranked defensive end. So the fact that he got them mid to late in the second round, definitely my hats off to them. Obviously, from a fantasy perspective, one of the biggest players that we saw was Zach Moss. A bit of a controversial player. Not so much the player himself, but where he was ranked. A lot of pre-draft sources had him outside the top 5, maybe top 10, like 8, 9, 10. Whereas Pro Football Focus, PFF, had Moss ranked as our RB3. Take it for what it is. I mean, Zach Moss, he's a pretty good player. What I liked about him is that he has elite contact balance. He's kind of like a bowling ball. He has good vision in the pocket, but he doesn't have a ton of burst. He was a little bit slower to combine. He ran a 4.65 40, but apparently he was hurt. So overall, I mean, for him to be drafted at 322 to the Buffalo Bills, I mean, really that those third round running backs are about as late as you'd be super confident starting with them. But you know, to pair up Zach Moss with Devin Singletary, you know, Bills Mafia, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think it pretty much indicates that Devin Singletary, although here at the Flex Network, we actually do believe that he does have the ability to be a 3-down back. That's not how Buffalo sees him. So in that sense, I'm okay with it. I like it. I mean, obviously they got Stephon Diggs, who I've always loved. Stephon Diggs. He's always been one of my favorite players. I think overall he hasn't quite really hit that expectation where people thought he could, you know, really hit that elite level. But overall, I like what Buffalo's doing. And man, the AFC East is pretty much wide open right now. So the fact that they're making these moves, I mean, it definitely bodes well for Buffalo. So, all right, next is Miami. I have to say, I don't think they messed it up. I'm actually pretty confident with how Miami is actually progressing. I mean, like I love Brian Flores. I think he's a good leader, and we're going to talk about Detroit when we go through the NFC, but I'm not a big Matt Patricia fan. I am a big Brian Flores fan. I feel like he's got a good head on the shoulders. He brings confidence to a team, and I mean they showed it. They didn't mess it up. They took 2 at 5, and then they came back and pretty much they got a guard, Austin Jackson, and they're building up that line right now. So I'm pretty confident with how they're doing. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's there if Tua's not healthy. Now we were talking about it on the show yesterday that the general consensus is that Tua is going to start day 1. He's telling the media that he's available, he's healthy, he's 100%, or he'll be 100% by the time, if there ever is a training camp, it actually hits. But I'm pretty confident that worst case scenario, Tua will get in probably within halfway through the season, early part of the season. And they always got Ryan Fitzpatrick. But what's really interesting, so they traded for Matt Breida, which I love. I think they traded him for a 5th round pick. Which is an absolute steal for a guy like Breida. And of course, they got friggin' Jordan Howard still. So I guess they didn't get Fournette. Jacksonville's probably asking for too much, but Miami, I would say a draft again. Which then leads me to my beloved Patriots, who I'm not going to lie to you. I love Kyle Duggar, who they took at 2.5 in round 2. And I love the fact that they traded back because I felt like 23rd pick in the first round was kind of that dead zone. There wasn't a ton of value that I felt was worth going after, but overall, I'm a little bit concerned. If we were talking about it yesterday, if New England didn't have a coach like Bill Belichick and really just their pedigree of winning and their history in winning, you could argue that they're one of the bottom teams in the league right now. They're obviously confident in Jared Stidham, which makes me a little bit more confident. He had a really good preseason last year, you'll remember. He has got good chemistry with Jacoby Myers, which we love, but James White, I think he's going to have his moments. So probably a good player that you might want to target in best ball. N'Keal Harry, jury's still out. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, the jury's still out on the first round pick from just a year ago. Sonny Michel, man, he did not look good last year, and he's going to be heavily game script dependent. And you really just can't see the Patriots really being in goal line situations all that often this year, barring some sort of miraculous Jared Stidham just arrival, which I think that'd be lying to myself if I said I believe that was going to happen. So a little bit reluctant to say that New England is going to go out and just dominate the AFC East this year, but hey, man, I mean, they're still the reigning champs right now in that division, and until they're dethroned by one of these other teams, and they're still the champs right now. All right, the New York Jets. Look, I'm not going to bury the lead here. The fact that they got Denzel Mims at 227, I tweeted it out during round one of the draft that there was that feel that DK Metcalf effect of falling to the second round was similar to the Denzel Mims type trajectory, but it's still a great landing spot. I like Sam Darnold. I'm kind of a Sam Darnold apologist, and they needed that alpha wide receiver. Jamison Crowder is a guy that we've touted as a pretty good value round 8, round 9 in your best ball drafts. And I'm going to like the combination. I think that a guy like Mims who can just go out there and beast. I mean, see you later, Robbie Anderson. We're not going to miss you at all. And then the other major player that they did draft, somewhat fantasy relevant, is La'Mical Pirine. So he did play well at the Senior Bowl. Didn't have a great week of practice, but during the game he stood out, which from the running back perspective, it's really the game is when they have the opportunity to stand out once everybody's in pads and they're actually hitting at full speed. Whereas the wide receivers typically have more of an opportunity to show out during the week, a la Denzel Mims. But overall, he played pretty well. And in the fourth round, he's going to be a pretty good complement, I would say, to Le'Veon Bell. So, all right, that is it for the AFC East. Overall, I have to say, arrow pointing up for Buffalo, arrow pointing up for Miami. The Jets, I'm going to call it neutral. And then New England, I mean, yeah, it's not looking too good for New England. So, all right. So, Baltimore Ravens leading into the AFC North. I would say, again, they ended up drafting Patrick Queen in the first round, inside linebacker from LSU. He's an absolute stud. So I love that. And then they came back and got absolutely sick with J.K. Dobbins at the 23rd pick in the second round. J.K. was, I think, pretty much consensus top 3, top 4 running back. Some guys had him as their RB1. I know that Al Season Long says J.K. was always at least in the conversation in terms of the top running back prospect before the draft. And I mean, how could you go wrong with a guy like J.K. Dobbins? They ended up getting the speedster, the sure-handed Devin Duvernay at the end of the third round, which again, for these skill position players, round 3 is pretty much the latest that you really want to take one of these players. But Devin Duvernay from Texas, I mean, he ran a 4.39 40. He played out of the slot primarily, and it's going to be interesting because Marquise Brown obviously is a bit of a specialist type weapon. Miles Boykin, he is a guy who unfortunately hasn't quite lived up to the hype. He was an absolute specimen last year at the combine, but didn't really do much this year. Duvernay isn't going to be a replacement for Miles Boykin, but you wonder if they're trying to get speedy and opening up the field, because you know that rushing attack now with J.K., Mark Ingram, obviously Lamar, is going to be pretty deadly. So I like what they're doing. I would be pretty surprised, to be honest, if they didn't actually end up winning the AFC North and going pretty far in the playoffs this year. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who had, of course, had the 1 overall pick. Joe Burrow, I mean, he's an absolute stud. What can you say? I mean, the pre-draft analysis was pretty much this guy is the nuts 101 type player. He led a historic LSU offense to national championship last year, so you can't really fault him for even anything. I mean, they did what they were supposed to do. Apparently they were receiving phone calls for the trade. When you've got a player like Joe Burrow that could absolutely be your franchise quarterback, you need to pull the trigger. It's always, you can't always look down the road, okay, we're 2 years away. You need to always have the win now mentality. And the fact that they took the pick, they drafted Joe Burrow, I love that. So kudos to Cincinnati. At the 2.1, they went and they drafted likely what's going to be the replacement for AJ Green. Who honestly, people are saying in a year or two, I think AJ Green is dust. I'm going to have 0 shares of AJ Green this year. I don't care how far he falls. And I let somebody else be a hero. That's the way I see it. But yeah, man, T. Higgins, he's 216 pounds, 6'4". He had an 18.6 breakout age and a 19.8 college yards per reception. So this guy's a bit of a beast. He didn't have the best 40-yard dash, and that's kind of the issue. He didn't test at the combine. So when he went and he had his pro day, there was more optimism, but he only ended up running a 4.59. So he's not a speedster, but that's not really his game. I mean, he's going to be the guy that's going to be able to go up and win those contested balls. Some of his best comparable players, as a frame of reference, Josh Gordon, the Black Anaconda, who's just an absolute monster. And of course, Mike Williams, who he could be a beast. Mike Williams had that high touchdown year. I want to say it was 10 touchdowns 2 years ago. So a player like that can absolutely be a value to a team. And a guy that nobody seems to really be talking about is Tyler Boyd. I think that this is going to be absolutely amazing for Tyler Boyd. I think wheels up. He's a guy who's getting a little bit older, but I want to say he's only 26 years old. And look, we saw what LSU could do last year and what Justin Jefferson did out of the slot last year. So if Tyler Boyd can go in, and he had that high dynamism score when he was in college, this is a guy that I think could absolutely dominate. And if you can get a guy like Tyler Boyd in your 5th round of your drafts as your wide receiver 2, that is absolutely wheels up, and I would absolutely love that. All right, moving on to Cleveland. So Cleveland did not really draft any skill players per se, but they did go out. They got Jack Conklin in the offseason, as well as they got Jedrick Wills, offensive tackle from Alabama, who some would argue was the number 1 tackle in the draft this year. So the fact that he fell to 10, I think they absolutely nailed it. I think we got to give Baker at least one more year before we absolutely write the book saying he's done. So give Cleveland credit. They didn't mess up. And it's going to be a competitive division. I think the AFC North, the football is better when the AFC North is good. And I think all 4 teams could be competitive, and it's going to be very competitive this year. I don't know who the favorite right now, who would I put my money on, but other than Baltimore, Cleveland, they're in the conversation at least. All right, moving on to Pittsburgh. Oh, Pittsburgh. Look, they made some good picks this year. They made some bad picks this year. I mean, so they chose Chase Claypool at the 217 pick, which in a vacuum, I mean, okay, it's fine. But, we just talked about Denzel Mims, who went at the 27th pick. I don't think that it's shocking to me that they wouldn't, if they want to go and get a beast, just an absolute specimen, Denzel Mims was there. And to go and choose Chase Claypool, who, don't get me wrong, like, I'm Canadian. I love the story. He's a really good kid. He blew up the combine. He's an athletic freak, but as a wide receiver, he did not have a great Senior Bowl, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But the optimism here is that Pittsburgh knows how to develop wide receivers. So if he was going to go to a team, I'm glad that he went to Pittsburgh. In addition, he could maybe play a bit of a hybrid type tight end role. They just signed Eric Ebron, but who knows if Eric Ebron has anything left in the gas tank. So maybe their long-term plans are or is actually to use Chase Claypool as the tight end position, in which case, hey, you can't argue it. I mean, he's a talented player, he's a beast, he's an absolute physical specimen, and Pittsburgh knows how to develop these players. So I think that I'm okay with it. I just wish they'd gone for a guy like Denzel Mims. That would have been absolutely sick. So overall, I would have to say, though, my favorite pick by Pittsburgh was Anthony McFarland in the 4th round. We just talked about that 3rd round is really where you want to get those running backs, and those really 2nd round in terms of that draft value. However, a guy like Anthony McFarland, I think on a team like Pittsburgh that loves to run the ball, I'm not entirely convinced that if James Conner goes out on an injury, which, let's be honest, folks, he's pretty injury prone right now. He's been injured in the past. It's likely going to happen again. If Anthony McFarland can walk in there and stay healthy and be dominant, I mean, he had 5.39 yards per carry. He's 5'8", 208 pounds, so he's a bit of a beast. I think that he can overtake that RB1 position. And if you can get this guy late in your drafts, I mean, probably I would say the teens of your best ball drafts, or as like the last pick of your just your season long drafts, this is the guy that I think is worth taking that lottery ticket on, because he can absolutely be a steal for you. So that's it. Overall, again, AFC North, Baltimore, I think, still going to be king, but they nailed the draft. Cincinnati nailed the draft. Cleveland nailed the draft. So all 3 teams, I think the arrow's pointing up. And unfortunately, there's only going to be one team that comes out on top. I'd be shocked if it wasn't Baltimore, but hey, man, Cleveland right now, they're making moves, and I'm pretty excited for that. All right, AFC South. Bill O'Brien. Houston Texans didn't really do much this year, and I would argue that they probably had the worst offseason of any team, obviously trading away DeAndre Hopkins, signing a player like David Johnson, who, let's be honest, I mean, his best days are behind him, like 3-4 years behind him. So I'm a little bit worried. Deshaun Watson, you guys know Deshaun Watson is probably my favorite quarterback that isn't named Tom Brady. And he's just an absolute baller. I mean, if this team's going to have any sort of success, it's going to be on Deshaun Watson's shoulder. So at least they're going and trying to get playmakers like Brandon Cooks, who never stays healthy. They have Will Fuller, who unfortunately never stays healthy. But if the stars align and these guys can actually stay on the field, Deshaun Watson is one of the top-ranked deep ball throwers in the league. So both those guys are deep ball, and hey, crazier things have happened, right? Indianapolis Colts. Have to say, so at the 2.2, they chose Michael Pittman Jr. Season long says was a little bit higher on Michael Pittman, but I mean, the truth is he's an absolute beast. He's 6'4", 223 pounds. He's an absolute machine in terms of a PPR machine. He had in college at 11 reception touchdowns, 10.37 yards per target, and 1,276 reception yards with an 82% catch percent, and over 100 catches with 101 catches. That matters. And a team like Indy, you look at Phillip Rivers, and who did he have? Oh yeah, he had a guy named Keenan Allen when he was in the Chargers uniform. So I think that Michael Pittman has the possibility to go in and be his Keenan Allen replacement. And his best comparable player is Dwayne Bowe. So, you know, there's definitely upside for Michael Pittman, and he's a good kid. So, you know, I like it, but our nuts, our 101, you guys know it. I love them. Jonathan Taylor, pick 2.9 to your Indianapolis Colts. In terms of a landing spot, is it the nuts? Is it the Kansas City Chiefs? No, let's be honest, it's not. But at the same time, Marlon Mack, he had his moments, but he never really just took the reins and just absolutely dominated last year. When you compare these two players, I think that in year one, they're probably going to be slow with Jonathan Taylor because they have that history with Marlon Mack, especially if there's a shorter season. But Phillip Rivers is new to the team also, right? So it's going to be a matter of guys that he trusts in the backfield. And Jonathan Taylor, man, I mean, look, in his senior season, 323 touches, 299 rushes, 1,909 rush yards, 21 rush TDs. This guy's an absolute beast. Some of the criticism is that he can't catch the ball. He still had 24 catches for 209 yards and 5 reception touchdowns in his senior year. So I don't understand where that's coming from. To me, that I feel like that's absolutely nitpicking. Jonathan Taylor came out. He pretty much obliterated the draft. I mean, he was just absolutely dominant. 41.8% college dominator rating, a 6.3 yard per carry, and his 40-yard dash was 4.39. That is an adjusted speed score of 121.7 according to playerprofiler.com. So, look, I'm still taking Jonathan Taylor as my 101. I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire landed an absolute dream scenario, but I'm gonna bet on the talent of Jonathan Taylor, and the fact that they still also have one of the best offensive lines in the league tells me that Jonathan Taylor is going to continue to have a very, very productive career. So I love it. Jacksonville Jaguars. Season long says his local team, not necessarily his favorite team, but all right, from a skill position perspective, a guy that I think generally higher than consensus on was Laviska Shenault Jr. from Colorado. This is the kind of guy who I think he can make a difference. Like he's been comped a few times to a player like Deebo Samuel, where you just have to get the ball in his hands, and he's the kind of player that can make a difference. He's a little bit slower. He ran a 4.58 40-yard dash, but he's a big body wide receiver. He's 6'1", 227 pounds. Player Profiler has him best comparable to AJ Brown. And last I checked, AJ Brown's a pretty good freaking player. And what I like about Laviska Shenault is that he's thick. I mean, he's one of these hot BMI guys. He's got a 29.9 BMI. And again, like I said, he's 227 pounds. So I love it. I think that he's going to be an absolute beast on the field next to DJ Chark, who we also love. So am I quietly becoming a freaking Jacksonville Jaguars fan? I don't know. But these are two wide receivers that I absolutely love. And yeah, I mean, good job, Jacksonville. Absolutely good job. Okay, moving on to the Tennessee Titans, who our boy, of course, Derrick Henry, we loved him. He's a Flex Network favorite. They lost Jack Conklin, but they did replace him with Isaiah Wilson with the 29th pick. I think that this is a great player, but Jack Conklin was special, so you can still be a little bit reluctant, but they're going to continue to run the ball. They have a plan, and Mike Vrabel and his son's mullets are confident in what they can do. And hey, man, I'm a Mike Vrabel believer. Like, they made it to the championship game last year, the AFC Championship, and I don't think anybody expected that. And I mean, AJ Brown's going to be another year in the system. I think wheels up for them. They also did draft Darrington Evans from Appalachian State in the third round at the 29th pick in the third round, running back. Look, he's basically the Deion Lewis replacement. He did have 1,488 rush yards and 17 rush TDs in college, but he's pretty good at catching the ball. I mean, he had 20 catches for four reception touchdowns on 140 yards. It's going to be the Derrick Henry show, ladies and gentlemen. Like, don't worry about anything. So overall, I'd say for the AFC South, Indianapolis probably had the best draft. I think wheels up for Indy. If Paris Campbell can do what we thought Paris Campbell could do, and he stays healthy, watch out for this team, man. I mean, they're probably my favorites to actually win this division next year. All right. We're going to finish out the AFC with the AFC West. Denver Broncos. They decided that they were going to go out and they were going to get weapons for their starting quarterback, Drew Lock. Of course, they drafted Jerry Jeudy at the 15th pick. And hey, guys, like, Jerry Jeudy is hashtag good. A little bit, I think, like, personally, I have CeeDee Lamb ranked ahead of him. And Jerry Jeudy going into a team where Cortland Sutton is the alpha, I don't think there's going to be a question about that. But Jerry Jeudy is an elite route runner. It's early in his career, but if he has a career trajectory similar to a guy like Antonio Brown, I don't think people are going to be too shocked by that because that's just the kind of player and the kind of talent that he is. He's 6'1", 193 pounds, which does worry some people, but he's still quite young. He's only 20.9 years old when he was drafted. And his best college yards per reception season was 19.3. That's elite. That was third in this class, tied or behind CeeDee Lamb. And I mean, he's best comparable to a pretty productive player, Jeremy Maclin, as well as a guy like Stephon Diggs. So Jerry Jeudy, I don't think it's absolutely nail in the coffin for him to go to a team like Denver, but I think it's going to be the alpha in that offense. It's going to be tough, and there are a lot of mouths to feed. Obviously, they did draft KJ Hamler from Penn State in the second round, and they came back in the fourth round and drafted Albert O, who he's probably one of the best hands-catching tight ends in the class this year. So opportunity is king in fantasy football. Having the ball in your hand is how you score fantasy points. Unfortunately, Jerry Jeudy didn't fall in the best situation, but man, on that Alabama team, there was a guy named Henry Ruggs on his team as well that he was the bright star in that offense. So if anybody's going to be able to pull out fantasy production on a team where there's not as much opportunity to do that, it's going to be a guy like Jerry Jeudy. So I would still rank him probably as my top 4 or 5 wide receiver, but it's a little bit tougher. All right, the reigning Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, pretty much in that position when they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the 32nd pick. There's going to be a lot of conversations between who's going to be the 101 this year, whether it's going to be Jonathan Taylor, whether it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I still have Jonathan Taylor ranked as my first overall, but it's really, really close. I mean, absolutely, Clyde Edwards-Helaire pretty much landed. I mean, he was argued to be a system-type running back in that LSU offense, and he had absolutely elite numbers. But listen, he fell into the absolute perfect system in Kansas City. So I would not fault you for taking him as the 101. I wouldn't do it because, again, I'm going with the whole draft profile of a guy like Jonathan Taylor. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to get sick, and man, just wheels up for the Kansas City Chiefs, dude. Like, the rich get richer. The Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, man. Excuse me. Henry Ruggs, the first wide receiver off the board. Guys, they're going to get sick. Henry Ruggs, Lynn Bowden, Bryan Edwards. Bryan Edwards had a 17.8 breakout age, had a 48.4% dominator rating. All you got to do is go and watch that game against Tennessee to see how much of a dog he really is. And man, they want to score points, and you can just tell it. Like, based on what Denver's done, how the Raiders drafted, they realize they are not going to stop Kansas City. So the only way they have a hope in hell of competing against them is to put up points, and can't fault them for it. All right, so LA Chargers. Of course, they drafted Justin Herbert at the 1.6, and I think that was a good pick. That was an absolute good pick. I mean, he was my third-ranked quarterback. Look, there's question marks about his ability to, lead when the bullets are flying, but give the kid a chance, man. He's got all the talent in the world. And unfortunately, at this next level, it's really hard to determine what really is going to make a successful quarterback. But he's got all the tools. He just has to make sure he gets his head right. And I think that he can do it. So you can't really fault, the Chargers for choosing him at the 6th spot. They didn't have to trade up. I think it's good value, and I'm excited for it. Unfortunately, you have to kind of rank down you guys like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. They're taking a step back. Even if Herbert doesn't start right off the bat, and as much as people shit on Phillip Rivers was a good quarterback. And Justin Herbert, it's going to take him a little bit of time, I think, to acclimate himself in the NFL. So I'm a little bit worried about that offense. I still love all my Austin Eckler. I mean, Austin Eckler, I think he's going to be absolutely feasting out there. I think he's going to be Justin Herbert's best friend. He's going to be his safety valve. and I love it. I love it. I love it. Joshua Kelly was drafted in the 4th round. Again, another good Senior Bowl story, but I don't think he's going to be a good compliment. But I mean, he had 1,065 rush yards, 12 rush TDs. Doesn't really catch the ball. He only had 11 catches in college, and he's not the biggest dude. I mean, he's only 212 pounds, 5'11". So he's going to be there. I like Joshua Kelly. He's a great kid, but it's wheels up for Austin Eckler. So overall, I'd say Kansas City, they're going to be the kings until you dethrone the king. So it's going to be tough. The Raiders in Denver are making the right steps forward. Chargers, I have to say, they're probably going to be the 4th ranked team in this division at the end of the year, but it's another competitive division, and it's going to be exciting to watch those games. Lots of skill players. I would say AFC West and the NFC South are going to be 2 absolute electric divisions to watch this year. So that's it. Thank you for listening. We're going to do another show discussing some of the NFC teams and what they did in the draft. But if you like what you listened to, if you found it valuable, please subscribe, please like, and rate us in Apple Podcasts. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, follow us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. I'm your host, Flex Shane. This is the Flex Network.